The world holds many strategic locations, but there is one narrow stretch of water that has the power to shake the entire global economy in a single day. Imagine a place so critical that if it were blocked for even a short time, oil prices could skyrocket, global trade could panic, and governments across the planet would immediately react. This place is not a massive ocean or a huge sea. It is a narrow passage only about 39 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, yet it controls the flow of one of the most important resources on Earth. This place is the Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, enormous oil tankers slowly move through this narrow waterway carrying millions of barrels of oil to countries around the world. These ships are massive floating giants, some longer than 3 football fields and heavy enough to transport entire cities' worth of fuel. Yet despite their size, they must carefully navigate a corridor that is surprisingly tight, surrounded by powerful regional rivalries and constant military surveillance. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a shipping route. It is one of the most important geopolitical pressure points on the planet. To understand why this narrow strait matters so much, we first need to look at where it sits on the map. The Strait of Hormuz lies between the northern coast of Iran and the southern shores of Oman, connecting the Persian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman. It is essentially the only maritime exit for oil produced in several major energy-producing countries in the Middle East. Tankers leaving ports in nations like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, and the United Arab Emirates must pass through this narrow gate before reaching the wider oceans and continuing toward markets in Asia, Europe, and beyond. Because of this geography, an extraordinary amount of the world's oil passes through this single choke point. Estimates suggest that roughly 1/5 of the global oil supply travels through the Strait of Hormuz every day. That means the energy powering cars, airplanes, factories, and power plants across continents often begins its journey through this narrow passage. When analysts talk about energy security, the Strait of Hormuz is always at the center of the conversation. But what makes this region truly fascinating is not just the volume of trade moving through it. It is the tension that constantly surrounds it. For decades, the waters of the Strait of Hormuz have been watched closely by military forces from several countries. Patrol ships, surveillance aircraft, and naval fleets frequently monitor activity in the area. The reason is simple: if conflict ever disrupts this passage, the economic consequences could ripple across the globe within hours. The geography of the strait itself adds to the tension. Although the entire strait is about 39 kilometers wide, the actual shipping lanes are much narrower. International maritime routes divide the traffic into 2 channels, one for ships entering the Persian Gulf and one for ships leaving it. Each lane is only a few kilometers wide, meaning massive oil tankers must travel carefully and slowly, often guided by navigation systems and strict maritime rules. With such limited space, even a single accident or obstruction could temporarily disrupt traffic. For decades, the strategic importance of this location has made it a focal point of regional power struggles. On the northern side sits Iran, a country with a long coastline along the strait and a strong naval presence in the region. On the southern side lies Oman, which shares control of parts of the waterway and works with international shipping authorities to maintain safe navigation. Because Iran's coastline dominates much of the northern edge of the strait, it has significant influence over what happens in these waters. Throughout modern history, tensions involving Iran and other global powers have often led to discussions about the security of the Strait of Hormuz. During periods of political crisis, leaders and analysts frequently raise the same question: what would happen if the strait were closed? The idea of closing the Strait of Hormuz is often described as one of the most dramatic scenarios in global energy politics. If tankers were unable to pass through the strait, millions of barrels of oil per day would suddenly be unable to reach international markets. Oil prices could rise dramatically, and energy-importing countries might scramble to find alternative supplies. Governments and financial markets would react instantly. This possibility has led many countries to maintain strong naval presences in nearby waters. The United States, European allies, and regional powers regularly conduct patrols and exercises aimed at ensuring that shipping lanes remain open. Their presence reflects a shared understanding: the Strait of Hormuz is too important to allow instability to interrupt its operation. The history of tensions in the strait includes several dramatic incidents. During the 1980s, when the Iran-Iraq War expanded into what became known as the Tanker War, both sides targeted oil shipments in the Persian Gulf. Tankers were attacked, mines were placed in shipping lanes, and international forces became involved to protect commercial vessels. These events demonstrated how vulnerable global energy supply lines could become during conflict. Even outside wartime, occasional confrontations occur in the waters of the strait. Naval patrol boats sometimes shadow foreign ships, surveillance aircraft monitor activity from the sky, and diplomatic disputes occasionally spill into maritime tensions. Each incident reminds the world how fragile such a critical choke point can be. Despite these tensions, the Strait of Hormuz continues to function every day as one of the busiest and most vital shipping routes in the world. Tankers move through it almost constantly, forming a steady stream of vessels carrying oil and liquefied natural gas to global markets. Satellite images often show long lines of ships waiting their turn to pass through the narrow lanes, highlighting the immense scale of energy trade flowing through this small stretch of water. Another reason the strait remains so important is the growing energy demand from Asia. Countries such as China, India, Japan, and South Korea rely heavily on oil shipped from the Persian Gulf. For many of these economies, energy arriving through the Strait of Hormuz fuels industries, transportation networks, and economic growth. As global energy consumption continues to rise, the strategic significance of the strait only increases. At the same time, energy producers and importing nations have explored ways to reduce their dependence on this single choke point. Some countries have built pipelines that allow oil to bypass the strait by traveling over land to ports outside the Persian Gulf. However, these alternatives can only handle a fraction of the total volume transported by sea, meaning the Strait of Hormuz remains irreplaceable for global energy trade. Standing on a ship passing through the strait, the view can feel surprisingly calm. The waters appear ordinary, the sky stretches wide above, and distant coastlines frame the horizon. Yet beneath the calm surface lies one of the most strategically sensitive corridors in the world. Every tanker passing through represents energy flowing into global economies, and every naval patrol represents the effort to keep that flow uninterrupted. For historians and analysts, the Strait of Hormuz is a perfect example of how geography can shape global politics. A narrow passage of water, formed by natural geography thousands of years ago, now influences the balance of power, international diplomacy, and economic stability across continents. The story of the Strait of Hormuz is not just about ships and oil. It is about how a single location can become the heartbeat of global energy. It is about how geography can turn a small stretch of water into one of the most watched places on Earth. And it is about how the world's economies, industries, and daily life remain connected to a narrow gateway between two coastlines. Every day, as massive tankers glide through the water and disappear into the open ocean, they carry more than just oil. They carry the weight of global energy security and the quiet reminder that sometimes the most powerful place on Earth is not a city or a capital, but a narrow strait between two shores called the Strait of Hormuz.